Hours have already passed. Although the young man's story is coming to an end, it remains unfinished with chapters unwritten. Hi, this is Kim.E from isnotso.com, and you are listening to Fall and Rise Again, Part 3. As is with everything in life, it is only with complete surrender to the ultimate fall that we are adequately empowered to pick ourselves up again. Every action or inaction in life has a reaction and a subsequent consequence. More often than not, the repercussions are more difficult to stomach and the responsibility thereof harder to own than the actions themselves. Once again, the story shows how life is everything but random, as if people and experiences are strategically placed to serve a distinct purpose that eventually leads us back onto our predefined paths. Each experience has its emotional signature. It is within the most challenging of life's lessons that we discover the personal truth we favor diversion from. In retrospect, we understand that the place we have arrived at was only made possible because of the rollercoaster journey we endured to get there. With this story's ending, the objective of this young man's journey becomes apparent. His struggle was always the diversion and not the addiction. The acknowledgement of his personal truth subsequently opened a door that allowed him to step into life's next phase. And so his story continues. During the ecstasy time, a DJ in the class had a label together with a partner. They also played at the New Form Festival in Wiesen. We knew him, so we often went to one of their events or a festival together with his other mates from class. Those were the types of places we went out to. We were never really typical club goers. They weren't open-air festivals though. They were in clubs or locations that could be rented. That is where we smoked weed and took ecstasy. Not everyone took drugs or smoked. My observation was that at this age one drank lots of shots or drank from a funnel. It is when you are not allowed to drink that you really want to. A funnel is a pipe that is filled with beer. While the bottom is held closed with one hand, the beer is poured into the top. This you drink all at once. It was something that was done outside or at festivals because you got drunk so quickly, even on half a beer. I never really liked alcohol. I always preferred drugs, so at these festivals most of the youth drank alcohol. Our clique smoked weed, and every now and then there was an opportunity for us to take drugs. Then with the college times we became quieter. We knew which apprenticeships we wanted to do. The dealer we had didn't want to deal with drugs anymore and gave it up. Our weed was scarce. Except for what we found while we were out, he had almost nothing. Another friend found someone called the Black Cyclist, who was called that because he was black and rode a bicycle, which is also how his deliveries were made. Buying drugs is possible in the city and more difficult in the country. There are head and grow shops in Austria. Theoretically, you are allowed to grow marijuana plants in Austria as long as you don't allow them to flower, because that is what you smoke. You make tea with the leaves though. The substance that makes you high is THC, which is found in the cannabis flower. These head and grow shops sell everything you need. There you can buy cannabis seeds to plant. So if you were to buy 10 seeds, maybe only 5 of them would grow. There are different types of seeds. First you grow a mother plant, and when it is so big, everything is cut off and planted again. Then when they have grown this big, they are cut and replanted, and so you continue. It works quite well actually. We smoked that and it was quite good, although even with weed you never know if something has been mixed with it, or if it has been brixed. The normal THC crystallizes on the flower, and these crystals are sticky. When the flower is brixed, it looks like THC. You only notice that it isn't THC when you smoke it. It is only dangerous to smoke gritweed over many years. I must admit that I never noticed it much, especially when I was on speed. After a year, the Black Cyclist also stopped dealing. Then the time came when we found our best dealer. My best friend found him on Facebook. He lived in Linz. For 6 months or so, we got our stuff from him. My best friend would go to him alone, and of course, he got to know him better. There was a festival in Moonviertel, so I decided to go to him too. I bought, I think, 14 grams of weed and 3 grams of speed, and then travelled to movie theatre for the weekend. It was great. He was also the dealer I went to after college. From then on, I always bought from him. This was shortly before graduation. I did a practical for 3 months and earned a lot of money. I was home from college by 4 o'clock every day. It was also during this time that I tried acid with 2 friends. After graduation, we took mushrooms and, of course, 2CB, which I never really stopped taking. For me, 2CB was amazing. Then the time came after graduation where, after getting to know the dealer better, I went to him regularly. The weed and speed were always delivered to his apartment. I took all the drugs while at home alone. No one ever noticed. They probably realized that I smoked weed, but that wasn't really a problem for them at the time, I don't think. A friend of mine was exempt from civil service, which every guy has to do in Austria, and he could work straight away. I was accepted for civil service, but I had to wait a month. I was at home alone with over 4,000 euros. The door was wide open to take a lot more drugs at home, and I had my dealer that I liked and got on well with. I would sit at his place for about an hour or so before going home. It was like a friendship. During this time, I started taking drugs from 10 o'clock in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening again. I always told myself that I could sleep better. I was taking drugs at least twice a day for almost 2 months. I didn't want to depend on others to take drugs anymore. I wanted to throw myself into drugs and experience it by myself. Before, I was never the one who bought the drugs. I was the one who was reserved and mostly clung to others when there were drugs. I was not the person who went up to a dealer and spoke to him. I just couldn't do that. My friends accepted that. They said it was fine. They said they would do it for me. There was never a problem at the time, but at some point I wanted to do it myself. Besides that, being addicted meant that I would have to do it by myself eventually anyway. I had time. What else should I have done with so much time? I wanted the experience. I had never spoken to anyone on an emotional level. I never had deep conversations with my parents because they weren't good at that either. Psychosis started. Psychosis doesn't just begin in a healthy person. Psychosis needs reasons, seeds, some or other traumatic experiences, worries, problems in life. It doesn't matter what, a divorce, fights, being gay, something one worries about that has not been processed properly. Something so bad within the subconscious that it triggers psychosis. I never really thought about my parents' divorce and never coped well with it. At the time, I never knew how to deal with it. Things like, my parents are not who they once were. What is happening in my life? I never worked through anything. I would have needed to concentrate on myself more. I never had anything to do besides take drugs. Nothing to work towards where I could have said, I'm so good at this. I'm going all out for this, and then to come out of it satisfied. Besides the drugs, there was nothing else. Instead, I overdid the drugs. I think that after 2 months of taking drugs every day, the psyche says, enough, we cannot take this anymore. I had just turned 19. I somehow always knew, but I just wouldn't acknowledge it. During every high, there was a reaction, an impulse, and a time when the high worsened. If I had been tuned in, I would have realized and I wouldn't have carried on taking drugs. I never noticed. Now in retrospect, I know that after the first third of the trip, the high experience got successively worse. But I needed the high. It somehow gave me satisfaction. If I had noticed earlier, it probably wouldn't have come to a psychosis. I know that it was a feeling of fear that triggered it. During this time, I played a lot of computer games, and at that time I also played with my twin brother. I knew I was good, but he was still better than me, even though I am the oldest. There is a difference between 5 and 10 minutes with my birth and my brother's. It was a natural birth. I was the older brother who could never really do anything well besides take drugs. My brother proclaimed his passions. I had none. I had inferiority complexes. I cannot tell you exactly what happened, But there was half an hour where everything possible was going on in my head. I was anxious and upset. I was playing a computer game with two friends via Skype, during which we chatted. I had taken drugs, speed and cannabis, but they didn't know. They were friends from another group, and even though they knew I did drugs, they didn't know I was taking drugs at home. So I started getting very upset during the game. I was not playing well against one guy. I was swearing and complaining for about 20 minutes, and then there was a blackout. I only remember fractions of how the game continued. I am unable to reconstruct how I reacted, why I reacted that way, what I did then or how I did it. I had started screaming because I was so angry, they told me afterwards. That was also strange for them, but they thought it was because of the game, even though they had never seen this side of me before. When I came around after the blackout, I ran downstairs crying that I didn't want to die. My mother called my father and told him I wasn't okay. So he was also there. He lives 2 villages away. I sat downstairs for a long time. The psychosis was a fearful state, a loss of reality, feelings of desperation with lots of crying. I went to bed with the thought in my head that my parents will kill me during my sleep. I fell asleep quite content. Everything was over. That was calming. The shit that I had experienced was finally over. The loss of reality, the state of fear. My parents had triggered it, and so my parents killing me had become real for me. The next day we went to the family practitioner. My whole world seemed crazy. The whole system, the control, everything follows you. A place where the person isn't seen. I didn't tell them that the previous night had to do with drugs. My mom knew that I smoked weed, but she didn't know about the drugs. Once when I sent drugs home, my mom found them, but it never came to a serious conversation. My mom asked me what they were. I said they were drugs and that she shouldn't even think that I would take drugs. I grabbed the drug package and went upstairs. We never had another conversation about it again. She would sometimes make remarks like, "Take care, don't do anything stupid." Nothing more though. While at the family practitioner, my intense drug consumption over the last weeks came out. I was immediately sent to Vagnayara Clinic to have psychiatric treatment. I was put on benzodiazepines for 2 weeks. They were good for me, and within these 2 weeks I became calmer. I often got scared though, and the psychosis amplified the state. I was also scared because my changed reality chased me and wanted to take over me. I had to completely focus on myself to keep myself above water. Psychologically, I couldn't think about what my environment expected of me or would expect of me. I quickly understood that I needed to change something, and I couldn't afford to carry on as before. I just had to continue, and it worked. I completed my civil service without interruptions. I also worked for my father during the time before my first job started. I moved out from home, which is when the second psychosis started. I was in the day clinic until summer, and my therapist there described this as a second psychosis, which was probably triggered by the change due to me moving out from home. I wanted to move out though. I was so motivated. I had a job, I had money. My father had an apartment for me. I could test myself. I knew I was able to consume anything if I wanted to. I never did. It was during this time that I held personal conversations with myself, which never seemed strange to me. Of course, I had thoughts at the back of my mind that I quickly brushed away. I wasn't suffering any depressions. I had everything under control. I was happy with my life. I could look after myself and live again. I could keep my head above water, and for that I was quite proud. What came out from the second psychosis was transsexuality, which I recognized relatively soon after. Well, not recognized, I got an inner impulse. That was a catastrophe. I was 19. It was about half a year after the first psychosis. I was in therapy. I saw a psychologist every week and spoke about my problems and my worries. At one point in a therapy session, there was a thought, and an inner voice asked, "What was that?" I was so overwhelmed because I knew it couldn't possibly have been wrong. I simply had to accept it. I slowly started asking myself more often what exactly that meant. I recognized myself and I knew I had to accept it. That is when I attempted to speak about it during my therapy sessions, which didn't automatically work because I lacked control over myself after the second psychosis. At first, I spoke relatively broken sentences that didn't make much sense at all. Now I am with a therapist who specializes in drug abstinence and transsexuality, which is exactly what I am looking for. Transsexuality is when you do not feel comfortable in your body and want to have the other gender. It is not as simple as just wearing female clothing and living like a transvestite. I do not feel comfortable as a man in female clothing. I would need to work on myself a lot more before I would have the courage to walk out in female clothes and to live this lifestyle. I have yet to learn what transsexuality means for me. That ends part 3. The last information I had was that this young man was back at home with his mother and twin brother. He had found a job in nature. He had begun his journey of self-discovery. He had been successful at practicing sobriety. I would like to add my personal opinion. I truly believe that the use of drugs is an escape from a reality we wish to avoid facing, or a hallucinatory and ecstatic one we wish to chase. Sexuality, whether heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual, should be topics that are openly discussed with acceptance and absolute understanding, yet without any form of judgment or shame. Teachers, parents, or anyone in positions of influence, regardless of what they may be, should question their personal opinions regarding age-relevant topics such as sexuality and practice an open mindset. The damage that is done, or the negative influence one has through narrow-minded perspectives that feed off personal expectations with ego needs to control, ruins the lives of so many. Become responsible. Own responsibility. If we refrained from judging and instead concentrated on the source of emotional stress and the unbearable pain individuals suffer that lead to substance abuse, we would all begin to make a difference in the lives of others. That concludes Fall and Rise Again, Part 3. Please also read Austrian Village Teen, Part 1, Enter the Dark, Part 2. Now for some extra information. What is acid? Reference, drug-free world. LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, is one of the most potent mood-changing chemicals. It is manufactured from lysergic acid, which is found in the ergot fungus that grows on rye and other grains. It is produced in crystal form in illegal laboratories, mainly in the United States. These crystals are converted to a liquid for distribution. It is odorless, colorless, and has a slightly bitter taste. Known as acid and by many other names, LSD is sold on the street in small tablets, microdots, capsules, or gelatine squares, window panes. It is sometimes added to absorbent paper, which is then divided into small squares decorated with designs or cartoon characters, Looney Tunes. Occasionally it is sold in liquid form, but no matter what form it comes in, LSD leads the user to the same place, a serious disconnection from reality. LSD users call an LSD experience a trip, typically lasting 12 hours or so. When things go wrong, which often happens, it is called a bad trip, another name for a living hell. What are magic mushrooms? Reference, Wikipedia. Psilocybin, or magic mushrooms, are naturally occurring and are consumed for their hallucinogenic effects. They belong to a group of drugs known as psychedelics because of the changes experienced to perception, mood, and thought. The key ingredient found in magic mushrooms is psilocybin. When psilocybin is taken, it is converted in the body to psilocin, which is the chemical with the psychoactive properties. Magic mushrooms look much like ordinary mushrooms. Magic mushrooms are eaten fresh, cooked, or brewed in a tea. The dried version is sometimes smoked, mixed with cannabis or tobacco. Other names: shrooms, mushies, blue meanies, golden tops, liberty caps. What is THC? Reference Life Science. THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol, is the chemical responsible for most of marijuana's psychological effects. It acts much like the cannabinoid chemicals made naturally by the body, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, the NIDA. Cannabinoid receptors are concentrated in certain areas of the brain associated with thinking, memory, pleasure, coordination, and time perception. THC attaches to these receptors and activates them and affects a person's memory, pleasure, movements, thinking, concentration, coordination, and sensory and time perception, according to the NIDA. THC is one of the many compounds found in the resin secreted by glands of the marijuana plant. More of these glands are found around the reproductive organs of the plant than on any other area of the plant. What is cannabis? Reference Wikipedia. Cannabis has mental and physical effects. It causes a high or stoned feelings and other effects, including a general change in thought and perception, difficulty concentrating, impaired short-term memory, altered sense of time, impaired body movement, relaxation, and an increase in appetite, otherwise known as munchies. Onset of effects is felt within minutes when smoked, and about 30 to 60 minutes when cooked and eaten. The effects last for 2 to 6 hours, depending on the amount of consumption. At high doses, mental effects sometimes include psychosis, delusions, hallucinations, paranoia, and ideas of reference, sometimes with anxiety and panic. Its physical effects include increased heart rate, difficulty breathing, nausea, and behavioral problems in children whose mothers use cannabis during pregnancy. While cannabis plants have been grown since at least the 3rd millennium BCE, evidence suggests that it was being smoked for psychoactive effects at least 2,500 years ago in the Pamir Mountains. Since the early 20th century, cannabis has been subject to legal restrictions. The possession, use, and cultivation of cannabis is illegal in most countries of the world. Marijuana, or marijuana, herbal cannabis, consists of the dried flowers and fruits and subtending leaves and stems of the female cannabis plant. This is the most widely consumed form, containing 3% to 20% THC, with reports of up to 33% THC. What is Brixed weed? Brixed weed is sand, sugar, or hairspray, with which the weed is laced to make it look better, to preserve older weed, and to make the weed heavier. In turn, this means that more is earned because drug prices are determined by the weight in grams. Laced weed is called grit weed. What is psychosis? Reference Wikipedia. Psychosis is an abnormal condition of the mind that results in difficulties determining what is real and what is not. Symptoms may include false beliefs, delusions, and seeing or hearing things that others do not see or hear, hallucinations. Other symptoms may include incoherent speech and behavior that is inappropriate for the situation. There may also be sleep problems, social withdrawal, lack of motivation, and difficulties carrying out daily activities. Psychosis has many different causes. These include mental illness, such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, sleep deprivation, some medical conditions, certain medications, and drugs such as alcohol or cannabis. What do transsexual and transvestite mean? Reference Campus. Transsexual people feel that they are not the gender which they were assigned, but this comes from a neurological condition and often needs to be treated with medical intervention, including gender reassignment surgeries and hormone therapy. A transvestite is someone who dresses in what would conventionally be worn by the opposite gender and acts in that manner. Again, this has nothing to do with sexuality. What is sexual orientation? Reference: Kids Health. The term sexual orientation refers to the gender, that is male or female, to which a person is attracted. There are several types of sexual orientation that are commonly described. Heterosexual, straight. People who are heterosexual are romantically and physically attracted to members of the opposite sex. Males are attracted to females and females are attracted to males. Heterosexuals are often called straight. Homosexual, gay or lesbian. People who are homosexual are romantically and physically attracted to people of the same sex. Females are attracted to other females. Males are attracted to other males. Homosexuals, whether male or female, are often called gay. Gay females are also called lesbian. Bisexual. People who are bisexual are romantically and physically attracted to members of both sexes. That concludes Fall and Rise Again, Part 3. This is Kim.E from isnotso.com. Thank you so much for listening.